April 2026 mandate controls. I welcome back our great guests from this month, including Darkness Manifesto's Johan Eklöf, Lightbahn's Chetna Misra, and a man who single-handedly is trying to have the Connecticut Court System held to the law of the land. Wow. In this episode, were the lights in Waveland Golf Course really going to be that bad? A rainbow laser that stayed on until 3 a.m. and blasted 60 miles out to sea. And we cover some ecology news. You'll want to stay with us this episode as we have a very brief but a great little piece of listener feedback. Let's jump into it. Welcome to another Light Pollution News. Every month I bring on some guests to help me go through the news and on how careless artificial light is actually changing our nighttime environment and changing the world around us. I bet you didn't know that. Maybe you did. Maybe you're a regular listener and you didn't know that. I'm your host, Bill McGeaney. I want to just give a little quick plug for our website. If you go to lightpollutionnews.com, you can see all of today's show links. There's more links embedded in the walkthrough. So when we're talking, you can actually see the links. We go through the website, you can actually see and read along and find some of the links that we discuss in there. Because I have a key set of links at the top, and then there's some links that are always embedded that I don't include because they're secondary links. They're not primary links that drove the story. In addition, over on lightpollutionnews.com, we also have, you can sign up for our mailing list. Highly recommend that. And then you can also become a supporter should you choose to do so. Supporters, this is a listener support show. We don't have any other income outside of that, and you help keep us going here, literally. So if you choose to be a supporter, when you're on lightpollutionnews.com, go support the show, and you will get my full article pull list for each month, which usually is in the hundreds. 140, I think, was somewhere this month, 150, somewhere. That was the total news article stuff, just collection of items that I was able to grab this month. And you also, as a supporter, you will receive invites to future recording sessions, and you can be a audience member and sit in on the show. Or if you ever want to get in touch with us, simply email me, bill@lightpollutionnews.com, or you can go out to any of our social medias, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, or you can use the text link in certain podcast players. There's a text link in there where you can actually just text the show. So let's get into it today. I want to welcome back to the show a great panel of guests this month. First off, let me reintroduce Leo Smith to you at home. Leo works to grow the coalition to reduce outdoor light pollution up in Connecticut. You used to be a board member for Dark Sky International, 2004 through 2016, and you have worked to help curate the Illuminating Engineering Society's roadway lighting via their roadway lighting committee. Leo, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here, Leo. Great
to be here.
Next up, I want to welcome back Chetna Misra with us from up there in the Ottawa region, a spot that's a really cool little area. Chetna, you are lucky to be up there. You're an architect by training. Your organization, Lightbahn, works at the intersection of lighting expertise, human-centered design, and environmental stewardship. You host dark sky experiences up there around the capital region, which, as you said, is only... For me, I have to drive 4 to 6 hours to find dark skies. For you it's 2 hours. To me, that feels like a stone's throw away. No, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Will. So glad to be here.
You come from the field of lighting design. How do you see the field of lighting design evolving to handle light pollution? Is it?
It definitely is. And I think we're at a point where the role of a lighting designer is evolving, based on the recent studies we've had about light pollution, and it's fundamentally expanding. And I would say for decades, lighting has been centered around architectural or human context, right? And I think things like comfort and efficiency and experience. And in doing so, I think the industry has produced some remarkable work and pushed the industry forward. But I think as awareness of light pollution grows, we are starting to recognize a blind spot in that approach, where in optimizing for humans and architectural context, we've largely targeted the rest of the living world as background context and not stakeholders, And so today, the evidence is undeniable. And artificial lighting at night doesn't just illuminate spaces. I think it reshapes entire ecosystems. There's data to prove that, right? So like insects, birds, and nocturnal life have always been affected, yet they were very rarely part of the conversation. So the role of lighting design can no longer stop at context or human-centered outcomes. it has to become nature and environmental centered. So I think, in my opinion, dark sky lighting is not a niche consideration anymore. It is quickly becoming a non-negotiable for anybody who is committed to, say, future-facing design. So I think, in a nutshell, I think the very definition of who the user is, who are you defining for, has to evolve and move forward.
I presume in the past, it used to be if the user wants dark sky lighting. Is it wrapped into best practices, I guess?
I think in the past, and almost a decade ago when I used to work with clients mostly wanted lighting, which was to light their property, The clients that I've worked with, also with the awareness of light pollution, the conversation has evolved from just doing the lighting for a particular project to more like, why are we doing what we're doing? Because they are inherently asking questions like, why not, And that's the real conversation. They are also making an effort, so that's what the awareness is doing. So, yeah.
Good stuff. Well, keep up the good work. And I am interested in following Lightbahn. See, it looks like you have some really cool trips up there. Algonquin, we're going to be up in Algonquin later this summer. So I'm looking forward to, going back up there. So I was up there last winter and caught just a stunning sky. It was like absurdly cold, but amazing as well. So, last but not least, I'd like to welcome back Johan Eklöf to Light Pollution News. Johan, you're a bat researcher by training. You wrote this amazing book, Darkness Manifesto. I loved it. I know a lot of other people have loved it. Welcome back to Light Pollution News.
Thank you. Great to be here. I often use the light pollution news to find what's the latest. So it's really good to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You have a new book coming out.
I have, not officially, but well, now it is. It's about moonlight, and it's also called Moonlight. So I went from the artificial light to the natural light at night. So what does the moon mean for us? Well, how does it control animals and nature? What happens? How does it control the circadian rhythms in different animals and stuff like that? And also some myths. And
this is a really important book to be coming out. And I say that because one of the things that I hear when people, I don't know what their slant is, who these people are, if they have good intentions or if they are propagandists. I don't know what their background is. But one of the things I'll hear is, well, we have the moon, that's artificial light. Why is that? Why are artificial lights all sudden bad? But you've always had the moon and that provides light and you don't see anyone having problems with that. So, Johan, why is that the case?
Well, if you compare the moon to artificial light, then you probably were around before life even started to evolve on Earth, because, as long as life has been around, we had the moon circling us. And that's just as the sun, we have the moon telling the time. And, we have created our own rhythms according to that. So every living thing is somehow connected to the moon. And if you the moonlight, even though it feels bright, especially in winter when you have snow and you can almost read a book under the moon, but it's still just, a street light is 100 times brighter than that. So it's quite a big difference.
When do you think you'll have this book out? How do we learn about this book?
It should be out in August, September in Sweden, and I know that it's being translated right away, as opposed to the Darkness Manifesto, which took some time. So perhaps this fall.
Oh, that'll be great. Looking forward to it. Just I assume that they're using AI to translate, so hopefully just double check that guy. Seen some pretty funny stuff come out from AI.
Yeah, we try to avoid that.
So I have some ecology news that I want to get to, but before we get to that, this month, I can't control the news feed that comes in. And I try my best to kind of cater it around my guests, but sometimes you just have one month it will be ecology will hit big. Other months, you might have streetlights or something else will hit big. This month it was policy, and policy just blew up this month. So I'm going to talk about this one that actually was a story that, as we progressed to build the show for this month, the story progressed, and you'll see how it progressed. But there's an interesting question here. So out in Des Moines, Iowa, It's the residents and the Drake Observatory were surprised when they were notified that the city intended to light the Waveland golf course. Residents packed out a clubhouse and they voiced their concern and dismay at the plan, of which none were invited to any prior discussion. Per the Des Moines Register, the golf course, for any of you listening that probably aren't from Des Moines, I've never visited Des Moines. It's the oldest golf course west of the Mississippi here in the U.S., and it was planning to light the course to be part driven by state property tax changes, which reduced the actual funds that the city was now receiving. So they wanted to find a new way to get those funds, and one of it was to extend the hours of the golf course much later so more people could use it and they could collect more revenue. The course itself is managed by a separate vendor who operates it as a for-profit business. The vendor, C Corp, yes, that's literally its name, is contracted to manage the facility until 2040. It apparently purchased lighting out of its own till, and in order to manage the course, C Corp entered into an agreement with the city whereby city earns 11% of the net revenues at the facility. So the city's making some money on this. It's not a huge amount, but they're making money on it. Now, at first glance, the plan appears to be doom and gloom. I say that as pure conjecture because the picture you have of this is that someone's going to come in with these big floodlights that's just going to light up the golf course. Because, right, we always think the worst. But the vendor they were looking to use was Musco Lighting, who's actually Des Moines based. I didn't realize that that's where they're from. Musco Lighting, for you listening, you probably have seen their work. And they did the U.S. Open tennis last year. They specialize in sports flavor and dark sky flavor sports lighting. You see them at numerous youth fields. And the lights are honestly really good. The plans, since this started back in February and about a week ago, the plans have now been rescinded because the residents have voiced a lot of concerns, specifically regarding light pollution. So in my mind, you have to have a one or the other. If light pollution activists are going to go out there and say, hey, we want responsible lighting, the city looked like they actually went without, obviously the residents weren't informed of this before any of this project took place, which is probably the root of the problem. But they actually went out and contracted with a responsible lighting vendor. But the residents didn't want any of this lighting to begin with. Where do you sit? Like, I'm curious to you guys, are dark sky advocates looking for darkness, or are they looking for responsible lighting? I feel like Musco would have been a great vendor for this.
Darkness comes first, but in reality, we can't always do that. So that's when responsible lighting comes in. And I don't see that there's anything wrong lighting up a golf course. You can play for another hour or a couple of hours perhaps, but during the night it should be turned off, of course. So I think information is the key here.
Chetna, this is a user design issue, right?
Also a lighting issue. And I think in the lighting design issue, what I mean, there can be any number of lighting fixtures that can be used, for a certain function. Sure, it can be also from a responsible lighting vendor. But if it's not designed responsibly, it's a tool that you're working with, the light fixture, right? And if it's not, the lighting strategy is not responsible, then it won't work, in my opinion. So, and like Johan said, darkness comes first. And there has to be a curfew. And if people are already raising their voice against it, then I'm sure they're getting annoyed with it. So, yeah, I think it's a multifold problem to solve.
But it's a good thing that people are getting annoyed with light. We need more of that, I think.
Well, are they getting really annoyed with the light, or are they annoyed that the city kind of sideswept them and didn't involve them in the plan to begin with?
Probably the second.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that extending the time for play at night really is in the best interest of society overall, or certainly in the best interest of nature. My thought is that probably no lighting is better, but then if you have to have lighting, do it responsibly. Mandating controls, whether it's dimmers or motion sensors or timers, but mandating that all light fixtures have to have controls. It's getting more and more into the energy conservation part of this, where there's a section of the building code called the Energy Conservation Construction Code. And we find further and further regulation of outdoor lighting. Things like all facade lighting has to be turned off an hour after the close of business and leave off until an hour before the business opens. That's something that came out about 4 years ago, but it's more and more regulation of lighting. So it's just a matter of time. We'll get there.
And you can look at it other ways. I mean, you could have like once in a week events. You can play for 2 hours longer, or you can have a night golfing where you have fluorescent balls.
Yeah, that's pretty
You can see the balls in the dark.
That's a pretty good idea. That'll be actually pretty neat. I want to stress, Musco, and I don't know what kind of fixtures. I don't know the plan. This is part of the problem, probably, is that the plan was not conveyed. And if they would have sold it as, if Musco did bring in really good lighting and it would have sold it to the community, maybe they would have been able to have that buy-in. But I think the community automatically fears for the worst. So they have this, it's the same idea that when you're talking to someone and you say, oh, you need to turn off your floodlight out back, they have the gap in information. There's a gap in information that the individual can't see, right? And that gap is what they're fearful, and that creates irrationality in it. That's just my assumption on it. So I want to tell you guys this quote too. Here in the U.S., our local news on TV is astoundingly bad at what they do. And this always seems to be, when you read the news a lot, you get to see this stuff. It's always the TV news. Here's a quote from the news agency I'm not going to name. On the other side of the course sits the Drake Municipal Observatory. Open for over 100 years, the observatory is run by both the city and Drake University, offering a space where folks can make astrological observations of the sky. So now they'll be able to keep reading the stars, and I'm very glad that Drake Observatory offers it to them. Do you guys have good local news out there in Sweden? Are they this bad?
It kind of varies, but some news are actually quite good. But then we have some cases where, well, you hear something like this.
Well, here's one that I think, Leo, this kind of speaks to what you were talking about before. Spokane has an interesting approach to fill in some of the gaps in their street lighting. Their public lighting infrastructure, they don't want to be spending the money, I assume. So they decided that they wanted to use some of former President Biden's American Rescue Plan Act money to purchase motion solar power sensor lights for any resident who wishes to have it, with the goal of having people decide where that light should go, with a special emphasis on sidewalks, roadways, and alleyways. And the plan has proven to be really exceedingly popular in Spokane, and now there's a backlog of orders. Spokane is a Bortle 8 to 9 city. It's not a dark city at all. And it's, I believe, the second most populous area in Washington. I could be wrong by that. What do you think about this, Leo? Isn't this kind of the user saying, hey, you know what? We don't need all that public lighting. Let the user decide. Let the free market figure out where the light should go.
And who should pay for it? I think that technology is wonderful, but leave it to the people. In other words, if you really want that light, pay for it. It's not one of those things that the government tax dollars should be paying for, because if it's free, if you get it for free, yeah, I'll take it. But if you have to actually pay out for it, you might be much more prudent about where you put your light.
You don't think that it has some kind of benefit, say, if instead of having the city randomly decide to just throw up streetlights everywhere that are always on, now you have a neighbor deciding to put up motion sensing lights in an area that they consider dark and that are a little...
The problem is that the people that are going to put the lights up have absolutely no study behind it. It's all random. It's absolutely totally mindless in terms of, that they're going to put it here and here and here without any basis for making that decision. It's just something that it's an emotional gut reaction about more light equals more safety, more safety, more safety. So my thought is I wouldn't support that type of a program. If you want to have that technology and the homeowner has to go and pay for it, then that's fine. But if it's the federal government or the state government that's shelling out the money, All it is promoting lighting without any rational basis for a need.
I want to play devil's advocate here for you, Leo. The money's already been allocated, right? This is money that's already been tabbed out, right? They have this, they don't know what to do with this cash. They got it somehow. And wouldn't it be better if the person who lives in that neighborhood, their feelings, their emotion is what matters, right? If you can put up streetlights, that's an emotional play. So why not just let that individual put up these motion sensing lights, which aren't going to be on 24/7, I assume. Maybe they switch it on 24/7. I don't know. Motion sensing lights do have that ability, but I presume that it's supposed to be for motion sensing. So other than some deer, it's going to be able to show it if someone's walking their dog at night. They have a whole string of lights coming on. How's it any different from having motion sensing streetlights?
It's not a question of whether there's a difference. It's a question of whether there's a need. You should put lighting out only where it's needed. And by need, it doesn't mean that it's fulfilling an emotional satisfaction. It means that there is a genuine safety need for that light, whether it's walking on the sidewalk or whether it's driving on the street, that there has to be a rational foundation for the fact that you'll be using the energy, that you're going to be interfering with natural darkness. You have to have a rational basis. If you don't have a rational basis, then from where I come from, there's no need for the lighting at all.
Chetna, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree 100% with Leo. And I think this sort of outsources the lighting design to untrained users, which is, to say the least, risky. And because fundamentally what dark sky lighting design philosophy is, what we're working with is more light is not better lighting. That's the essence of everything that we design around. And I think in a bottle, for example, in a bottle 8 and 9 area environment, this doesn't solve the light pollution problem. It just fragments it into thousands of uncontrolled sources. And infrastructure lighting, in my opinion, it's best designed when designed as a network. That's the idea, and this looks like more of a short-term patch replacing rather than long-term infrastructure thinking, in my opinion.
Just trying to get some votes, huh? Is that what we're talking?
I mean, you could use the money to buy everybody a torch.
There you go. That'll be fun. Well, talking about useless lights, let's go to a story that I've talked about before on here, but it seems like they've got back in the news. I've never been to Georgia's beaches. I've always heard that they're the best in the U.S. I will take everyone's guidance on that. I have not been there. This story comes from Glynn County. And you recall last time we met our heroes down there in Glynn, they decided to table the extinguishing of a highway tower light setup that they had for a new Buc-ee's going in place. The Georgia Department of Transportation requested that they turn off the lights because it was affecting nearby sea turtles, and Glynn County commissioner said, no, we think it's fine. We don't need to turn it off. Glynn County also requested some evidence on how blue light affects sea turtles, despite receiving it from the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. That being said, it's probably not much of a shock that we're here again with a different story from Glynn County. There's a zoning ordinance that has been worked on for 7 years now in that area, and a new ordinance was slated to include a sea turtle provision at the end of 2025. So they actually had that written in there that shoreside lighting to be greater than 560 nanometers or otherwise a deep amber or red color. The verbiage was derived from a collaboration between the St. Simons Island Sea Turtle Project and the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. Well, sometime between the end of the year and now, the provision has been removed, deemed burdensome to property owners, and of course, most importantly, real estate developers. Instead, Glynn County is now sitting with an ordinance which still has some basic controls, including a provision that blocks light from being directly illuminated onto the beach and requires shielding from lighting so that it cannot be seen from the beach. Sea Island, the beach that's in question, has the highest rate of sea turtle misorientation in Georgia. According to the current Georgia, it's doubled that of the state average, sitting somewhere around 22 to 23% sea turtle nests being impacted by misorientations driven by blue light. As of the recording of this show, Cortland Cook, the president of the Island Planning Commission has decried that there will be no chance, I'll say in hell, of this color change getting through. And I don't think I'd be wrong if I said that, but there will be no chance of this color change getting through. I should note that this isn't an odd policy. When you go down Florida, there's many communities down there that have amber or red lighting on the shore side, on the ocean side, for this very cause, to reduce the amount of sea turtle misorientation. Where to begin with that one?
Is it something we know? It's that the sea turtles are hurting from light. I mean, we know that for 30 years or something. And these turning lights off or having amber light, it's not a big thing. So just look at any other beach in the world. They're doing that already.
Yeah. Glynn County, I should know, they when they were looking at turning off those mast lights, they still requested evidence despite having the evidence. So you have business essentially driving the ordinance structure here. A lot of these, I presume, are rental homes and rental facilities that are probably along the beach. To round out our ecology policy segment, I guess the best way to put this, Shenzhen did something that Portland, Oregon failed to do, and that is apparently to actually side with protecting bird migration over vanity of some of its denizens. A resident in Shenzhen posted a request to the city's forum page to install more streetlights, both for safety and aesthetic purposes. Well, at least they're honest about the aesthetic side, right? The city, however, said no. Something that most likely would not happen here in the U.S. The area in question is Shenzhen Bay Park. By all accounts, it appears to be an exceedingly safe area. The park already has surveillance cameras in place to spy on any prospective criminals. And the city has worked with neighbors and environmentalists, volunteers who recognize that nearby streetlights cast an intense glow onto, I presume, the area around the park. The city spent 2 months modifying the lights to strike a balance between drivers and the birds. So as an aside, over the past few years, Shenzhen has actually showed a commitment to protecting ecology, and the city built 3 bridges to help migrating land animals, including leopard cats and wild boars, move around the park. We have a community that's actually doing something good for birds. Check that out. That's a pretty nice little story right there. And we'll get into some ecology stuff now. By the time you at home are listening, I know spring has sprung here in the Northern Hemisphere. And this article comes from Journal of Experimental Biology. It's a review that looked at nocturnal pollinators. So who are these pollinators? You'll be interested in knowing. If you didn't already, if you haven't read the book by Johan over here, that the general consensus is moths and bats provide a sizable chunk of nocturnal pollinating activities. Other insects include nocturnal bees. Beetles and flies take up the remaining share. The consensus is that pollinators tend to have following adaptations, including large eyes and enhanced night vision, and the ability to see colors in dim light, sensitivity to floral scents, and an ability to navigate by moonlight other stellar light. Some animals, including nocturnal bees, benefit from fuller moons, while others, including bats or moths, show no unified effect one way or the other. Pollinators tend to get disoriented, though, under artificial light, given the sheer overwhelming volume of it. Johan, do you want to talk a little bit more to that piece?
Yeah, we have spent quite a lot of amount of time last years to not cutting our lawns, and we bring up hotels for bees, and we're doing a lot of things for pollinators. But we forgot the night shifts. And as we are day creatures, we tend to focus on other day creatures. So it's easier to study animals that are more like us. So we forgot the night animals. And there are so many moths, for example, pollinating plants, and bats. Well, everybody knows that I'm kind of fond of bats for some reason. In the north, of course, they are mostly insectivores, but further south, there are many bats that eat flowers, pollen, fruit, nectar. So they do the same things as the bees do. They're just a little bit bigger. They hover over a plant, they got pollen stuck on them, and then they transfer the pollen to the next plant. And they also spread a lot of seeds while they're eating fruits. They poop a lot, so They're spreading seeds everywhere. So they're very important for pollination and for seed spreading.
The one thing that they noted was that floral color was distorted by artificial light. How's the bat vision work for being able to identify plants?
Yeah, they use echolocation as the first sense, and it's hard to echolocate plants in a forest, but they do see ultraviolet, at least some do. So the white flowers reflecting moonlight, for example, the bats can actually see the flowers. But there are some plants that have they got sort of structures that are cone-shaped, so they reflect sound better than the other plants. So they attract bats in that way as well. So there's so many things that's going on during the night that we have no clue of. And the scents, of course, a lot of, they smell the flowers.
Well, elsewhere we have an article out of Biological Conservation to examine how artificial light at night alters when wildflowers bloom and when their petals open across a Swiss agricultural landscape. Researchers exposed 14 wildflower sites to LED streetlights and compared them to 14 dark sky sites over the course of 2 growing seasons. They found that 75% of the 16 wildflower species studied showed significant shifts in flowering timing due to artificial light. 9 showed advanced shifts, of which they could be as early as 10 days, and 2 of them were delayed. With regard to the daily petal movements, results tended to be a little bit more mixed here. Daily flowering plants opened their petals roughly 147 minutes earlier under light, but the night flowering species showed mostly no impact in full petal closure or even opening. Distant light intensities as low as 10 lux produced flowering effects comparable to brighter nearby conditions of 30 lux. The real takeaway for this study that I found was the phenological mismatch, which is the timing of when the flowers bloom as it corresponds to their pollinator partners. The lunar cycle modulates these effects, with artificial light impacting the strongest with new moons and weakest with full moons, suggesting the plants misread the natural moonlight cues. Whether these shifts will translate into real or tangible impacts probably remains to be studied. Johan, what's going on here? Have you seen this kind of research out there?
Yeah, it's like knowing what time it is in nature. I mean, having no watch, you sense the temperature and you sense the light. That's how you can tell what time of year it is, what time of day it is. And if you're a flower and you depend on pollinators, you need to open up exactly when the insects fly. And have evolved through millions of years. And it's quite sensitive. So if you change the light just a little bit, turns out the flowers open a little bit too soon or too late, and they're not pollinated. And you have the same thing with trees, for example. They do not lose their leaves if they're standing under a street light. And you have a lot of those things in nature where just a small amount of light shifts your timing just a little bit.
It really is a small amount of light, right?
I mean, and different insects react to different lightings. So, like if you're one moth, you start flying at 6:15, and then next moth starts flying at 6:45, and depending on the light regime. And so you have that everywhere in nature. So there is no one size fits all here. You can't adjust the light to all species because all of them are so different.
Let me ask you this. Have you seen any adaptation from any of these moths?
I think there is a study where they found that city populations of moths have shorter wings because it's easier to escape from streetlights. So they're starting to adapt, but it's a slow process. And we are much faster, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think in that study, it also mentioned that since there's some issues, not just pollination, but with the actual longevity of the species because they don't fly around as much.
Yeah.
Well, staying on the insect theme, we have one from Environmental Sciences Europe. How do the joint stressors of invasive species and light pollution affect an ecosystem? This was an interesting one. The invasive species was a signal crayfish, and scientists utilized a 6-week experiment from May through July on 16 artificial streams in Germany. They lit the units with what they decided was urban level brightness as a 20 lux. The presence of crayfish reduced insect emergence by roughly 30% and reduced the quantity of quality nutrients that the insects deliver to riparian predators by anywhere from 25 to 40%. And artificial light itself didn't really curtail the insect numbers, though it did suppress crayfish activity, which kind of falls in line with prior research as well. Web building spiders showed elevated fatty acid content. As you listener knows, they're building under light exposure lit areas. The researchers here surmise that they build their webs underneath lit areas because they think they can capture more insects, or they might actually be drawn to the lights itself. So, and we had a great study on that, 3 months ago. The researchers here found that invasive crayfish threatened nutrient flows underpinning the riparian webs, while artificial light may have a more subdued impact, say as in the case of the spiders. But also, it looks like it changes kind of the order of life in waterways. Is that right?
It seems right, because if you change, as I said before, I mean, every species has its own preferred light. So when you change it just a little bit, then you change the whole ecosystem. And I think the signal crayfish, I'm not sure they call the signal crayfish in English, but it was just a direct translation from Swedish. They are invasive, the whole of Europe. They are not as night active as the local crayfish. So maybe they are invasive just because of the lights. I don't know if anybody's looked at that.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, because I've seen other studies that invasive species sometimes they thrive under the light compared to the local species.
Another one here, Proceedings of Royal Society B examine how artificial light at night affects coral reef fish in the wild, and it took a look at how it impacted across fish generations. The researchers claim to be the first ones documenting how generational fish are impacted. I'm not sure if that's really the case. I know we've had some studies on regarding that. Researchers spent 6 months in French Polynesia manipulating light exposure for 52 breeding pairs of orange fin anemone fish, 26 sites. They used LED lights at what they termed were street light level brightnesses between 2.8 to 18.4 lux, a very specific measurement there. Among the findings, adult fish exposed to light grew significantly faster. Female fish experienced a reduction in reproductive hormones. However, their offspring, despite being larger overall, exhibited drastically diminished escape responses, 18% decline, including a 12.8 reduction in acceleration and a 30% decrease in swimming speed. These embryos develop smaller yolk sacs with slower heart rates. And I think that one falls in line with what we've seen in the past studies as well. And then one more piece here. This is from Biological Sciences, where a team asked, how should we design outdoor lighting to attract less bugs? The team set up 4 different sets of lights, including your standard unshielded light, partially shielded light bulbs, and recessed bulbs. They use no light as the control, and they found that recessed lighting worked best. Surprisingly, the shielded lights attracted almost as many insects as unshielded lights. And to round out the insect news, we also had a study that showed about larvae of sandy beach beetle and how it behaved under the artificial light environment versus environments that are absent of artificial light. And larval activity sat at its highest under darkness and declined when artificial light was introduced. Part of this appears to be driven by the spectrum of the light. By these beetles react lowest under warmer spectrum lighting versus cooler temperature lighting. Just goes to show you that, there's no one size fits all for evidently, for anyone. Yeah, I was shocked about the shielded lighting study. That one, because I've heard about shielded lighting working to reduce insect attraction in, I believe, park somewhere. I forget what the name of the park was. But
did they look at what species? Were there different species attracted to the shielded lights than to the other lights? Or
if I recall properly, I don't think they looked that closely.
It's like a biomass thing, because it could change just what kind of species, because they perhaps closer flying at
right. Yep.
to the ground or something. I'm not sure, but I was surprised a little bit too.
Well, before we close out this show, I want to give you guys a chance to plug yourselves. I have 2 more articles I want to just touch on. They're fun ones, folks. So before we go, though, I want to give you guys a chance to plug yourselves. Leo, how can people learn more about the stuff you're doing up there in Connecticut? If they want to help you with the case, with your appeal, how can they get in touch?
My email address is leo@smith.net. They can email me directly, or they can go to the website, which is reducelp.org, and get information there.
Excellent. Good luck up there, Leo. I hope.
Thank you.
Hope for the best on that appeal. Chetna, I'm the listener. How do I learn about Lightbahn? I want to go check out some fun experiences this summer.
Sure. You can check us out on our online platforms, our website, of course, which is lightbahn.ca. You can reach me at info@lightbahn.ca, and also my LinkedIn. And I frequently publish my notes from my research or just experiences that we host on Substack. So, yeah.
It's really a great resource. I urge you, listener, to definitely check it out. And Johan, where can people learn more about the work that you're doing, and where can they learn about this new magical book you got coming out, this Moonlight book?
Well, I think I'm easiest to find on Instagram or LinkedIn. If you Google Moonlight or Darkness Manifesto, I think you will find me as well.
Sounds good.
And I promise I will try to do some more posts in English in the future, because
Well, we'll keep an eye out for that Moonlight book as well. And looking forward to that. Really looking forward to that. So as we close out today, I have 2 stories of light as celebration. And we haven't had many of these really in a while. It's been quite a while. The first one is a 400-year-old tradition during Ramadan out in Istanbul called Maya. It utilizes lights to spell out inspiring religious messages, which sit on top of mosques. It's 400 years old. Believe it or not, they actually used to string up cables across minarets with oil lamps. It's kind of mind-boggling, but they did this, and they spelled out words that, sent out good messages to people. Nowadays, they use Edison bulbs, which is pretty neat. Not using LEDs yet. However, the tradition may be in jeopardy of going away, as the individual who, I guess one of the individuals who's driving force around installations, is just aging out. He's not finding an apprentice to take it over. I'm going to struggle with this name. I apologize in advance for brutalizing it. As Karaman Yildiz is the man who's been working on putting these installations in for a long time. So should you be interested and you live in Istanbul and you have no fear of heights, because I don't think you can have a fear of heights at all when you're doing that job, and you need laser-like precision, you should definitely check that out. So it's a pretty interesting tradition that's been going on for a long, long time. On the other side of the world, we have something that is uniquely Floridian in origin and in implementation. They stole some inspiration from the Illuminate San Francisco crew, and you'll recall that there's a back and forth between Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and the Florida gay community. We had an article previously that showed how some activists rainbowified a bridge in Jacksonville after the bridge lighting was restricted from celebrating Pride Week. So activists actually lit the bridge up on their own for Pride Week. In St. Petersburg, Florida, there's apparently something called Winter Pride, and to celebrate, they decided to light up the skies of St. Pete with rainbow-colored lasers that could be seen for as far as 60 miles away. To add insult to injury, these lights, when operational, stayed on until 3 a.m., aimed at the beaches. The lasers were in response to Governor DeSantis's removal of rainbow-painted crosswalks. So this is culture. This is what people do. I'm not sure about the last one. The first one, it's a celebration. It doesn't seem to be. So using warm lighting, it's for a selected period of time. But yeah, you guys have any thoughts on any of those?
Well, it says something about how difficult it is to stand out in a bright city. You need to be very creative.
That's the way to put it.
Yeah, it also reminds me of tribute and light, on the line of celebratory lights or, installations where it's often installed to make extravagant, like it should stand out. But in hindsight, like researchers, for example, speaking specifically for Tribute and Light, they found out that the beams were actually trapping birds inside, right? And the ultimate solution was over the years of research that they had to switch it off for 20 minutes or when the counts became more than 1,000. So I think it's in line with that. I hope there are studies coming out of it where it sort of at least limits a curfew or something like that. But yeah, interesting to know this.
Yeah, the latter piece on the lasers is something that Illuminate San Francisco did back in maybe a few years back. They did a similar thing down Market Street in San Francisco, and they kept that on all night. I mean, this one turns off for a couple hours, but it's still, 60 miles. 60 miles. It goes for 60 miles over the ocean. Like, what are you doing? Leo, you have any thoughts?
It's just, again, a question of using light where you need it, and having the purpose is to make a statement. If you want to do that and you're going to have it, let's say, on until 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night, maybe okay. 3 o'clock in the morning, I don't think so. I think you should be more conservative with the use of light and use it really only where it's essential.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you guys one more time for joining me today. Really appreciate having you guys on. I want to thank you, listener, for staying with us today. As a reminder, Light Pollution News is a listener-supported show. Should you like what we do, why not consider supporting the show? Simply click on the Support the Show link in today's show notes. I want to also thank our social media volunteers, Emily Beyer and Laura Taylor. Thank you so much for all the great work that you guys do. You guys help us a lot. And many thanks to Caden for his excellent work in post-production. Today's episode was recorded on March 22nd, 2026. I'm your host, Bill McGinney, reminding you to only shine the light where it's needed. And before we go today, I have one quick piece of listener feedback from Nelson Krupp. Thank you, Nelson, for writing in. Really appreciate it. And if you at home are interested in having something read on the air or just have any thoughts on anything we did, be it on social media, be it here, be it on the show, whatever it is, just shoot it over and I can get it up here and we can all have a discussion on it. Nelson is writing a response to the newsletter that we sent out with our show for supporters. It went out back in March, and supporters, you can be a regular listener and there's more features in it for supporters. But Nelson's responding based on a discussion we had for glare. And Nelson's response was that glare to me is a bad word lacking a precise definition. And that is an excellent, excellent observation. Thank you, Nelson.